The rain did not just fall on the city, it assaulted it. Sheets of gray water lashed against the high windows of the DeLuca estate, blurring the lights of the downtown skyline into jagged streaks of gold and neon. Inside the library, the silence was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic swish of a polishing cloth and the labored breathing of the woman wielding it. Elena Ward paused, pressing a hand to the small of her back. She closed her eyes, waiting for the dull throb in her spine to subside. At 32 years old, she felt twice her age. Her day had started at 4 a.m. at the Regency Hotel downtown, where she had turned over 20 rooms before her shift ended at 2 p.m. Then came the bus ride, up into the hills, the steep walk to the service entrance, and the second shift cleaning the private residence of Marco DeLuca. She looked down at her uniform. It was 2 sizes too big, a shapeless sack of gray cotton meant to hide the secret she had been carrying for nearly 9 months. No one knew. Not the hotel manager who docked her pay for being 5 minutes late, not the other maids who gossiped in the break room, and certainly not Marco DeLuca. To him, she was a ghost in the hallway, a pair of hands that ensured his whiskey decanter was dust-free and his trash cans were empty. She preferred it that way. Invisibility was safety, especially when visibility meant questions about the father. A sharp cramp seized her abdomen, harder than the Braxton Hicks contractions she had been ignoring for 2 weeks. Elena gripped the edge of the massive mahogany desk, her knuckles turning white. She bit her lip, forcing the sound of pain back down her throat. She needed this paycheck. She needed every single cent. Tyler had left her with nothing but debt and a terrified heart, and the baby coming was going to need diapers, clothes, and a safe place to sleep that wasn't a drafty studio apartment with a broken deadlock. The heavy oak doors swung open. Elena flinched, straightening up so fast her vision swam. Marco DeLuca strode into the room, bringing the energy of the storm in with him. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and imposing in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Elena made in a year. His dark hair was damp from the rain, and his eyes, usually cold and unreadable, looked tired. He stopped when he saw her. He was supposed to be at a gala downtown. He was early. Elena dipped her head, clutching the polishing cloth like a shield. "I'm sorry, Mr. DeLuca," she murmured, her voice tight. "I thought you would be out until midnight. I will finish up quickly." Marco frowned. He walked further into the room, tossing a leather portfolio onto the desk near her hand. He did not dismiss her as he usually did. Instead, his gaze sharpened, sweeping over her pale face, the dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide, and the way she was subtly leaning her weight against the furniture to stay upright. "You look like you are about to collapse," Marco said. His voice was deep, a baritone that seemed to vibrate in the quiet room. "I am fine, sir. Just a long day. You are shaking," he observed. He moved around the desk, invading her personal space not with menace, but with a sudden, overwhelming proximity. "Sit down." Elena blinked. "Excuse me, sit down, Elena." Marco pointed to one of the leather armchairs in front of the fireplace. "I cannot sit on the furniture. Mr. DeLuca, it is against the— I do not care about the rules." He cut her off, though his tone lacked its usual bite. "Sit, now." The command was firm, leaving no room for argument. Elena's legs were trembling so badly she wasn't sure she had a choice. She lowered herself onto the edge of the chair, the leather cool against her legs. Marco walked over to the sidebar, poured a glass of water from a crystal pitcher, and brought it to her. "Drink," he ordered. She took the glass with a shaking hand. "Thank you." Marco leaned against the edge of his desk, crossing his arms over his chest. He watched her drink. His brow furrowed. "Why are you working this late? I pay my staff well enough that they do not need to kill themselves with overtime. It is not the pay, sir." Elena lied, lowering the glass. "I just like to be thorough." He stared at her, and she had the uncomfortable sensation that he could see right through the oversized uniform, right through the lies, straight to the terrified woman underneath. "You are hiding something," he said quietly. Before she could answer, a sensation like a hot iron rod twisting in her lower back doubled her over. The glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the Persian rug, but the sound was drowned out by the low, guttural cry that escaped her lips. "Elena!" Marco was there in an instant, dropping to one knee beside the chair. "I'm sorry," she gasped, clutching her stomach. "I'm so sorry about the glass. I will clean it up." "Forget the glass," Marco snapped, his hands hovering near her shoulders, unsure of where to touch. "What is wrong? Is it your appendix?" "No," she wheezed, squeezing her eyes shut as the wave of pain crested and crashed over her. "It is... oh God." And then the dam broke. A gush of warm fluid soaked through her uniform and onto the expensive rug, pooling on the polished marble floor beneath the chair. The unmistakable sound of water hitting the floor echoed in the silence. Elena froze, horror washing over her that had nothing to do with the pain. She had just ruined Marco DeLuca's rug. She had just gone into labor in the office of the most dangerous man in the city. "My water," she whispered, looking up at him with wide, terrified eyes. "I'm sorry. My water broke." Marco looked down at the floor, then back at her face. His expression shifted. The fatigue vanished, replaced by a sharp, military-grade focus. "You are pregnant," he stated, not as a question, but as a realization hitting him all at once. "Yes," she sobbed, trying to stand up but failing as another contraction hit. "I have to go. I have to get to the bus stop." "A bus stop?" Marco made a sound of disbelief that was almost a laugh. "You are not taking a bus. Elena, you are having a baby." He didn't call for a maid to clean the mess. He didn't recoil from the fluids or the chaos. Instead, he moved with a fluid, powerful grace. He swept one arm under her knees and the other behind her back, lifting her effortlessly into his arms. "Mr. DeLuca, no!" Elena protested, panic rising in her chest. "You cannot. My uniform is dirty. I will ruin your suit." "Be quiet," Marco grunted, striding out of the office and into the grand hallway. He barked orders into the air, his voice thundering off the vaulted ceilings. "Leo, bring the SUV around. Now, call Mercy General. Tell them I am coming in with a maternity emergency." Elena felt small and heavy all at once, curled against the solid wall of his chest. She could smell his cologne, sandalwood and rain, and beneath it, the warm, steady scent of a man who was completely in control. It was intoxicating, and it was terrifying. "Put me down," she pleaded weakly as he carried her through the front doors and into the driving rain. "I cannot afford this. I do not have the right insurance for a private ride." Marco ignored her. The black SUV screeched to a halt at the bottom of the steps. A security guard threw the back door open. Marco deposited her gently onto the cream leather seats, then climbed in right beside her, shouting at the driver to go. As the car peeled away from the mansion, slipping through the iron gates, Elena's panic spiraled. The pain was coming in waves now, closer together, sharper, but the mental anguish was worse. "Tyler will find out," she gasped, clutching her stomach. "If I go to the hospital? The insurance is still under his name. He will see the claim. He cannot know." Marco turned to her. The interior light cast shadows across his sharp jawline. "Who is Tyler?" "My husband, ex-husband," she corrected, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Please, just let me out at a clinic. I can't go to the main hospital." Marco studied her, his dark eyes assessing the fear that radiated off her in waves. It wasn't just pain, it was the terror of a hunted animal. He didn't ask questions. He didn't demand explanations. He simply reached out and covered her small, trembling hand with his large one. His grip was warm and rough, swallowing her fingers completely. "You are not going to a clinic," he said, his voice dropping to a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through her bones. "You are with me. No one touches you. No one finds you unless I say so. Do you understand?" Elena looked at their joined hands. His thumb was absently stroking her knuckles, a rhythmic, soothing motion that she wasn't sure he was even aware of. It grounded her. For the first time in 9 months, she wasn't facing the storm alone. "I can't pay you back for this," she whispered. "I did not ask you to," Marco replied, his gaze fixed forward as the SUV tore through the wet streets. "Just breathe, Elena. Focus on breathing." When they arrived at the hospital, the chaos was immediate. Marco barked at the orderlies, his authority cutting through the bureaucratic red tape like a knife. He stayed right beside the gurney as they wheeled her in, his hand never leaving hers. "Is he the father?" a nurse shouted over the din, looking from Elena's pale face to Marco's intense expression. Elena opened her mouth to say no, to correct the mistake, but a contraction seized her so violently she couldn't speak. She arched off the bed, a scream tearing from her throat. Marco didn't hesitate. "We need a private room," he commanded, ignoring the question but using the assumption to his advantage. "The best you have, and I want the head of obstetrics. Now." "Right away, sir," the nurse said, her demeanor shifting instantly to deference. They moved her to a large, quiet suite on the top floor. Elena was vaguely aware of the nurses referring to Marco as Dad and your husband, directing questions to him about her medical history. She watched through a haze of pain as he handled them, answering what he could, making up what he couldn't with confident authority. She felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the labor. To hear this dangerous, powerful man referred to as the father of her child felt like a fever dream, an intimate lie that she wanted, for just a moment, to be true. The next 4 hours were a blur of agony and exhaustion. Elena had spent her life working, scrubbing, lifting, and enduring, but nothing compared to this. She felt like she was being torn apart through it all. Marco remained. He stood in the corner of the room at first, giving her space, but as the pain intensified, he moved closer. When the time came to push, and Elena cried out that she couldn't do it, that she was too tired, it wasn't the nurses who brought her back. It was Marco. "Look at me," he said, his voice cutting through the haze. "You are the strongest woman I have ever met. Elena. You clean up other people's messes every single day without a complaint. You can do this. Bring her into the world." She focused on his eyes, dark and steady, and found a reserve of strength she didn't know she had. With one final, earth-shattering effort, the pressure released. A sharp, angry cry filled the room. "It is a girl," the doctor announced. They placed the baby on Elena's chest, a warm, wet, wriggling bundle of life. The world instantly shrank. The debt, the fear, the exhaustion, even Marco, it all fell away. There was only the tiny face, the screwed-up eyes, the perfect fingers grasping at the air. "Mia," Elena whispered, tears streaming freely down her face, mixing with the sweat. "Her name is Mia." Marco stood in the doorway, his hands in his pockets. He felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. He had seen violence, death, and power in all its forms, but he had never seen anything like this. The woman who had been practically invisible to him hours ago was now radiant, fierce, a warrior catching her breath after the battle. He couldn't look away. Later. The room was dim and quiet. The nurses had cleaned everything up and left them alone. Mia was swaddled tightly in a plastic bassinet next to the bed, sleeping. The rain still tapped against the window, but inside, the air was warm. Elena lay propped up against the pillows, looking younger and smaller without the uniform. Marco sat on the edge of the bed. It was a breach of professional boundaries so vast it was almost laughable, but neither of them moved to correct it. "You did good," Marco said softly. Elena looked at him, her eyes tired but clear. "Thank you. For everything. I do not know what I would have done." She took a deep breath, her fingers twisting the bedsheet. "You asked about Tyler." Marco waited, his silence an invitation. "He is Mia's father," she admitted, the words tasting like ash. "We were married for 3 years. He's charming. Everyone loves him, but he likes to own things. And when I left him, he didn't like losing his property." She looked toward the sleeping baby. "There are forms. Legal documents for the hospital, for her birth certificate, for state insurance. Because we are not legally divorced yet, I need his signature. If I do not get it, he can contest custody. He can claim I am keeping her from him. But if I tell him she is here..." Her voice trailed off, trembling. Marco reached out, and with a gentleness that betrayed the violence in his hands, he brushed a damp strand of hair away from her forehead. His fingers lingered for a second on her temple. "He refused to sign?" Marco asked, his voice deceptively calm. "He said he would sign only if I came back," Elena whispered. "He uses the paperwork as a leash." Marco withdrew his hand, but the warmth remained on her skin, making her heart stutter in her chest. "No man should hold a child over a woman's head," Marco said. The darkness in his eyes wasn't directed at her, but she felt the weight of it. The moment stretched, thick with an unexpected tenderness. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just a boss, but a man who had stayed, a man who had held her hand. Suddenly, the door burst open. A nurse bustled in, holding a clipboard, looking flustered. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there is a gentleman at the nurse's station. He says he is the father. He's demanding to see the baby and checking the visitation logs. He's quite insistent." Elena's blood ran cold. The color drained from her face, leaving her ghost white. "He found us," she whispered, panic seizing her throat. "He must have gotten the alert from the insurance company. Marco, please, do not let him near her. Please." She tried to sit up, reaching for the bassinet, but Marco was already moving. He stood up, his suit jacket settling perfectly onto his broad shoulders. He adjusted his cuffs, his expression shifting from the gentle companion back to the ruthless dawn of the city. "Stay here," Marco said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a judge passing a sentence. "Rest." "Elena, but he—" "I said rest." Marco walked to the door. He paused for a fraction of a second, looking back at her and the sleeping child. Then he squared his shoulders and stepped out into the bright lights of the hallway. Down the corridor, a man in a sleek polo shirt was leaning over the desk, flashing a dazzling smile at the head nurse while tapping a gold watch on the counter. "Tyler." Marco began to walk toward him. He didn't rush. He moved with the predatory grace of a wolf spotting an intruder in its territory. The air in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. This was no longer a hospital wing. It was a battlefield. And Marco DeLuca had just decided which side he was fighting on. The fluorescent lights of the hospital hallway hummed with an irritating, insect-like buzz, casting a sterile pallor over everything. Outside room 312, the air grew heavy, charged with the static of imminent violence. Marco DeLuca stepped out of the room, letting the heavy door click shut behind him, though not all the way. He wanted to hear everything, and he wanted Elena to know he was standing right there. He adjusted the cuffs of his dress shirt, the silk cool against his wrists, and turned his dark gaze toward the nurse's station. A man was leaning over the counter, flashing a smile that was too wide, too practiced. He wore a navy polo shirt tucked into khaki trousers, the uniform of a man who desperately wanted to project stability and success, but smelled faintly of cheap cologne in desperation. Tyler Hayes. "I am her husband," Tyler was saying to the head nurse, his voice smooth, dripping with a calculated charm that made Marco's skin crawl. "I understand she checked in under emergency circumstances. I have been calling her phone for hours. I just want to see my wife and child." "Surely you understand a father's anxiety." The nurse looked flustered, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Sir, as I said, the patient has requested privacy, and there are protocols regarding—" "I am not a visitor, sweetheart, I am family," Tyler interrupted, his smile tightening at the corners. "The law says—" "The law implies you have rights only if you are not a threat to the patient." Marco's voice cut through the conversation like a jagged blade. He did not shout. He did not need to. His baritone rumble seemed to suck the oxygen out of the corridor. Tyler spun around, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion, and then, as his eyes landed on Marco, to a flicker of genuine recognition. Marco stood with his feet shoulder-width apart, his hands loose at his sides, the posture of a man who did not need to posture. Tyler took a step back, his eyes darting to the scar that ran faintly through Marco's eyebrow, a detail often mentioned in the crime columns of the city newspapers. The color drained from Tyler's face, leaving his tan looking sallow and waxy. "DeLuca," Tyler breathed, the name slipping out before he could catch it. "You know who I am," Marco said, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. "That saves time." Tyler looked from Marco to the closed door of room 312, and then back again. A nasty, incredulous smirk began to curl his lip, replacing the fear with something uglier, bravado. "So that is how it is," Tyler said, his voice rising in pitch, loud enough to carry— He laughed, a sharp, barking sound. I knew she was desperate, but I did not think she was stupid. Elena is sleeping her way up the food chain, is she? From cleaning toilets to warming the bed of a mob boss, inside the room. Elena lay frozen in her hospital bed. The pain of her recovery was a dull throb in her body, but Tyler's words were a sharp, twisting knife in her gut. She squeezed her eyes shut, tears leaking out, her hands clutching the thin hospital blanket. The shame was hot and suffocating. She wanted to cover her ears, but she could not stop listening. "Watch your mouth," Marco said softly. His voice was deadly quiet, the kind of quiet that precedes a gunshot. "Or what?" Tyler challenged, stepping closer, emboldened by the public setting. "You are going to whack me right here in the maternity ward? I do not think so. She is my wife. That is my kid in there. And if she thinks she can run to a criminal to pay her bills and hide my daughter from me, she has got another thing coming." Marco moved. It was a subtle shift, just a tilting of his center of gravity, but it placed him physically between Tyler and the door, an immovable wall of expensive wool and muscle. "You are leaving," Marco stated. "Not until I sign those papers," Tyler spat, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Or rather, not until I decide if I'm going to sign them." He turned on his heel, pulling a cell phone from his pocket as if to record the interaction, but Marco simply stared him down until Tyler faltered, shoving the phone back into his pocket and retreating toward the waiting area. "If you want to play legal games," Tyler called out over his shoulder, "let us get a social worker in here. I want everything on the record." 20 minutes later, the air in the small hospital conference room was so thick with tension it felt unbreathable. Elena sat in a wheelchair, wrapped in a robe Marco had ordered one of his staff to purchase from a nearby boutique. It was soft, cashmere, and dove gray, but she felt like she was wearing a costume. She clutched the lapels tight to her throat. Across the laminate table sat Tyler, looking smug. At the head of the table sat Mrs. Gable, a hospital social worker who looked as though she would rather be anywhere else on Earth. Marco stood behind Elena's wheelchair, his hand resting on the back of the seat. He did not sit. He loomed. "Mrs." Gable cleared her throat, shuffling a stack of documents. "Mr. Hayes. The hospital requires an acknowledgement of paternity to be signed to list you on the birth certificate immediately, which also facilitates the insurance process's Mrs. Ward is concerned about, since you are legally married, the presumption is there, but your signature simplifies the custody and benefits immediately." Tyler leaned back in his chair, linking his hands behind his head. He looked at Elena, ignoring the baby sleeping in the bassinet beside her. "I am not signing anything," Tyler said casually. Elena's head snapped up. "Tyler, please. The hospital bills. The insurance is under your employment. If you do not sign, they will not cover her. I cannot afford this stay." "That sounds like a personal problem." "Elena," Tyler said, his voice dropping to that sickly sweet tone he used right before he broke things. "Or maybe it is Mr. DeLuca's problem now. This is standard procedure." "Mr. Hayes," the social worker interjected nervously, "it is in the best interest of the child. I will tell you what is in the best interest of the child," Tyler said, leaning forward, his eyes locking onto Elena's. "A mother who lives at home. A mother who is not scrubbing floors for strangers and running around with gangsters." He tapped the table with his index finger. "I will sign. I will add Mia to the insurance. I will make all this go away. But only if Elena checks out of here today, comes back to the apartment, and we resume our life. She quits the hotel. She quits working for him." Elena's hands trembled violently in her lap. He was doing it again, making the world so small that only he existed in it, using her daughter as a bargaining chip before Mia was even a day old. "I cannot go back to you," Elena whispered. "You know why?" "Then I guess Mia starts her life without a father on paper," Tyler said, shrugging. "And good luck fighting for custody when you have no fixed address and mountains of debt. I will paint you as unstable. Elena, I will tell the courts you abandoned our home to live a chaotic life. Who do you think a judge will believe? The man with the steady sales job or the maid? That is enough." Marco's voice cut through the room. He walked around the wheelchair, placing his knuckles on the table. He leaned down, bringing his face level with Tyler's. "This is coercion," Marco said, his voice low and controlled, like the rumble of a distant earthquake. "You are using an infant's medical care to blackmail a woman into returning to an abusive environment." Tyler did not flinch, though a vein in his neck ticked. "Abusive? Prove it. I have never hit her." "There are other ways to destroy a person," Marco said. Tyler sneered, leaning in closer to Marco. "And what about you, DeLuca? You want to talk about destroying people? I know who you are. I know about the warehouses on the east side. I know about the rumors." Tyler looked at the social worker, pointing a finger at Marco. "You want to know why she is afraid? Maybe you should ask the cops what this man does for a living. In fact, maybe I should call them right now. Tell them the great Marco DeLuca is threatening a law-abiding citizen in a hospital. I wonder how your operations would handle that kind of heat." It was a direct threat. He was weaponizing Marco's world against him, using the criminal element to force Elena into submission. If the police came, if an investigation started, Marco's business and the safety of everyone in it would be compromised. Elena let out a sob, a ragged, broken sound. Marco's expression did not change, but his eyes went flat and cold, devoid of all light. He looked at Tyler for a long moment, memorizing him. "We are done here," Marco said to the social worker. "But the papers—" "Mrs." Gable stammered. "I will cover the medical bills," Marco said, not looking away from Tyler. "In cash, in full. We do not need his insurance, and we do not need his signature to know who the father is. The courts can settle the rest." He turned to Elena, his demeanor softening instantly. "We are going back to the room, back in the private suite." The adrenaline that had held Elena together evaporated as soon as the door clicked shut, sealing them away from the hallway. She collapsed. It wasn't a physical collapse, but an emotional implosion. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with violent, racking sobs. The humiliation of the confrontation, the terror of Tyler's threats, and the overwhelming guilt of dragging Marco into her nightmare crashed down on her. "He is going to take her," she wept, her voice muffled by her palms. "He is going to take Mia. He knows how to talk to people. He knows how to lie. He will tell the judge I am unfit, and now he is going to go to the police about you." "Elena, I have ruined everything. You should not be here. You have to leave before he drags you down with me." Marco sat on the edge of the mattress. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he reached out and wrapped a heavy, solid arm around her trembling shoulders. He pulled her gently toward him until her forehead rested against the front of his dress shirt. He smelled of starch and expensive tobacco and safety. "Shh," Marco murmured. He brought his other hand up to her back, rubbing slow, rhythmic circles between her shoulder blades. "You have not ruined anything. He is going to destroy my life," she choked out, clutching the fabric of his shirt. "He's trying to scare you," Marco said, his voice vibrating against her ear. "That is what bullies do. They make you think they hold all the cards, but he does not hold anything. Not anymore." He let her cry. He sat there, a man who commanded armies of soldiers and moved millions of dollars in contraband, and simply acted as a wall for her grief to crash against. He absorbed her fear, his hand moving steadily on her back, a silent promise of endurance. Slowly, the tears subsided into hiccups. Elena pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen, her face blotchy and devoid of makeup. She felt raw, peeled open. Marco was looking at her with an intensity that made her breath hitch. He wasn't looking at her with pity. He was looking at her with a fierce, quiet admiration. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why are you helping me?" Marco lifted his hand from her back. He hesitated, then reached up, his thumb brushing away a stray tear that clung to her cheekbone. His skin was rough against hers, warm and alive. "Because I do not like bullies," he said softly. "And because you and that little girl deserve better than a man who treats love like a transaction." They were inches apart. The air between them seemed to thin, charged with a sudden, electric awareness. Elena looked at his mouth, the curve of his lower lip, and felt a pull so strong it frightened her. It wasn't just gratitude, it was a hunger for the safety he offered, for the strength he radiated. Marco's gaze dropped to her lips, his pupils blowing wide. His hand lingered on her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. He leaned in, just a fraction of an inch. From the bassinet, a sharp, squalling cry shattered the silence. Mia. The spell broke instantly. Marco pulled his hand back as if he had been burned, clearing his throat and standing up. Elena turned quickly toward the baby, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. I should check on her, she stammered. Marco nodded, turning his back to give her privacy, though the tension in his shoulders remained. I need to make a call. He stepped outside, but he did not go far. Minutes later, the door opened, but it wasn't just Marco. A younger man, thick-necked and serious-looking, followed him. Elena, this is Leo, Marco said, but he gestured to the man, who gave a polite, sharp nod. Ma'am? Leo said. Leo is going to be outside your door, Marco explained, his tone brokering no argument, 24 hours a day. He will be relieved by Dante in 12-hour shifts. No one enters this room unless you or I authorize it. Not Tyler, not the hospital admin, no one. Elena looked at Leo, seeing the bulge under his jacket that suggested a weapon. Is this necessary? Tyler threatened to go to the police, Marco said grimly, but men like Tyler usually try to handle things themselves first when they feel they are losing control. I am not taking chances. He walked over to the foot of the bed, gripping the railing. You and Mia are under my protection now, Elena protested weakly. I cannot ask you to do that. It is too much. You're not asking, Marco said. I am telling, despite her words. A wave of relief washed over her so profound it made her knees weak. The idea of Leo standing guard, of Marco's shadow covering them, felt like the first deep breath she had taken in years. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety. True to his nature, Tyler did not disappear. He escalated. Elena's phone began to buzz incessantly on the bedside table. Ding, ding, ding. She picked it up, her stomach twisting. Come on, baby, stop acting crazy. I love you. We can be a family. Ding. You're making a mistake. You think he cares about you? He's a criminal. Ding. I'm going to take her from you. You have no money. You are nothing without me. Ding. Please, I'm sorry I yelled. I just miss you. The messages swung wildly between apologetic declarations of love and vicious, venomous accusations. It was the cycle she knew so well, the dizzying whiplash that had kept her trapped for 3 years. Marco sat in the visitor's chair near the window, pretending to read a file, but Elena saw his jaw clench with every chime of the phone. He was watching her reactions, seeing the way she flinched, the way her breathing shallowed. Turn it off, Marco said finally, without looking up. I need to keep it on in case my lawyer calls. She lied. She didn't have a lawyer. Marco closed the file. He stood up and walked over to her, gently. He took the phone from her hand. He looked at the screen, reading the latest text, a threat to call Child Protective Services. His eyes darkened. He pressed the power button and held it until the screen went black. He cannot hurt you through a dead phone, Marco said. That night, the hospital grew quiet. The rain had started again, tapping a gentle rhythm against the glass. The room was dimly lit by the monitors and a small lamp in the corner. Marco had left for an hour to handle business, but he had returned. He always returned. Elena was nursing Mia, whining slightly as the baby latched. When she was finished, she burped the infant and sat there, exhausted, her arms aching. Would you? Elena started, then hesitated. Marco looked up from his seat in the shadows. Would you like to hold her? She asked. You haven't yet. Marco looked at the bundle in her arms. For a moment, he looked terrified. Me? No, I am not good with kids. My hands are... He looked at his hands. Hands that had fired guns. Hands that had broken bones. They are just hands, Elena said softly. She is sturdy. Come here. Marco rose slowly. He approached the bed as if he were approaching a bomb that might go off. He leaned down, and Elena guided his arms, positioning them correctly. Support her head, Elena whispered, just like that. Marco scooped the baby up. Mia was so small against his chest she looked like a doll. He held her stiffly at first, his muscles tense, but then Mia let out a soft sigh and settled against the warmth of his shirt. Marco let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. His posture softened, his face, usually a mask of stone, broke open. He looked down at the child with a wonder that was painful to witness. He rocked slightly on his heels, a natural, instinctual sway. "She is so light," Marco murmured, his voice rough with emotion. Elena watched him. The sight of the mafia boss, the man everyone in the city feared, cradling her daughter with such infinite care did something to her chest. It cracked the armor she had built around her heart. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. It was attraction. A deep, magnetic pull toward the man who could be both a shield and a shelter. "He's not going to let us go," Elena whispered into the quiet room, the fear creeping back in despite the peace of the moment. "Tyler, he never loses." Marco did not look up from the baby. He kept swaying, his large hand encompassing Mia's entire back. "Then he is going to learn," Marco said, his voice low and final. "Learn what?" Marco looked at Elena then. His eyes were warm, unguarded, and burning with a promise that sent a shiver down her spine. He's going to learn what no means, and he's going to learn that some things are not for sale. The lock on the front door of apartment 4B had always been finicky, but now, to Elena, it felt like a deliberate sabotage. She jiggled the key, her shoulder propping up the heavy diaper bag, while Mia slept soundly in the car seat, resting on the dirty linoleum of the hallway floor. The air in the building smelled of boiled cabbage and old cigarettes, a stark contrast to the sterile safety of the hospital and the expensive leather of Marco's car. Elena finally managed to turn the bolt and push the door open. Her apartment was exactly as she had left it days ago, small, dimly lit, and suffocatingly silent. A stack of unpaid bills sat on the wobbly kitchen table. The faucet dripped with a rhythmic, maddening plink. She carried Mia inside, locking the door and sliding the chain into place immediately. It felt flimsy, a thin strip of brass against the world. For the first 3 days back, Elena tried to build a routine. She was technically on leave from the hotel, but she needed to get back to cleaning Marco's mansion soon if she wanted to keep the lights on. Her body was still healing, sore and exhausted, but the fear kept her adrenaline high. Every creak of the floorboards made her jump. Every shadow that passed by the window looked like Tyler. Marco had kept his word. A black sedan was parked down the street, 24 hours a day. Leo and Dante took turns sitting in it, watching the building's entrance. The presence of the mafia soldiers made the neighbors talk. Mrs. Higgins from down the hall peered through her curtains, and the teenagers on the stoop stopped talking whenever Elena walked by. It made Elena feel exposed, like a spotlight was shining on her fractured life. She called Marco on the second night. "You do not have to keep them there," she had said into the phone, huddled in the bathroom so she would not wake the baby. "It is making people talk. I do not want your world spilling into mine any more than it has to." Marco's voice had been low, accompanied by the rustle of papers. "Tyler is already using my name as a weapon, Elena. He knows who I am, and he knows I am watching. If I pull my men, he will see it as a green light. We have to stay ahead of him." She hated that he was right. She hated that she needed a crime lord to feel safe enough to sleep. On the 4th evening, the rain had returned, drumming relentlessly against the fire escape. Elena had run down to the communal laundry room in the basement to retrieve a load of onesies and swaddles. She had left Mia in the bassinet for just 2 minutes, carrying the baby monitor with her, her heart hammering the entire time. She hurried back up the stairs, the laundry basket propped on her hip. As she turned the corner toward her apartment, she froze. Tyler was leaning against her doorframe. He looked impeccable, as always. He was wearing a beige trench coat over a crisp suit, his hair perfectly styled. He looked like the successful salesman he was, the charming husband everyone envied. But Elena saw the tightness around his eyes, the set of his jaw. "You changed the locks?" Tyler asked pleasantly, pushing off the wall. Elena took a step back, her grip on the laundry basket tightening until her knuckles turned white. "How did you get in the building?" "The front door is buzzed. People are polite." "Elena, someone was walking out. I walked in. It is amazing what a smile can do." He took a step toward her. The hallway was narrow, and he filled it. "Go away." "Tyler," she said, her voice shaking. "The judge said you are not supposed to be here. The restraining order is a piece of paper," he interrupted, his voice dropping to a low, intimate timbre that made her skin crawl. "And we both know paper does not stop a father from seeing his child." He glanced at the door behind him. "Is she in there? Is she sleeping? Do not touch that door," Elena warned, backing up until she hit the railing of the stairwell. Tyler sighed, shaking his head as if she were a recalcitrant child. "You are making this so hard. Elle, I'm trying to be reasonable. I'm trying to be a family. But you are forcing my hand. You are making me talk to lawyers who play dirty. You are making me dig up things about your friend Mr. DeLuca that will send him to prison for 20 years. He moved closer, invading her personal space. She could smell his cologne, expensive, musky, cloying. "I can make your life a legal nightmare," he whispered. "I can drain every penny you do not have. I can drag you into court every month for the next 18 years until you are so tired you cannot stand. Or you can open this door. Let me see my daughter, and we can fix this." "No," Elena said. It was a small word, but it felt heavy. Tyler's face changed. The charm evaporated, replaced by a flash of pure, unadulterated rage. "You do not say no to me," he hissed. He lunged. Elena flinched, turning her face away, expecting a blow, but Tyler didn't hit her. Instead, he slammed his open palm against the plaster wall right next to her head. Bang! The sound was like a gunshot in the confined space. Plaster dust rained down onto Elena's shoulder. Inside the apartment, through the thin wood of the door, Mia woke up. A high, thin wail of terror pierced the air. "See what you did?" Tyler shouted, his face inches from hers, spit flying from his lips. "You made her cry. You are a terrible mother." "Hey," the voice boomed from the stairwell below. Tyler spun around. Leo was taking the stairs 2 at a time, his heavy boots thudding against the steps. Another man, one Elena did not recognize, was right behind him. Tyler backed up, his hands going up in a mock gesture of surrender. The sudden shift from violence back to performance was terrifyingly smooth. "Whoa, easy," Tyler said, putting on a confused smile. "Just a domestic dispute? My wife and I were just talking." Leo reached the landing, breathing hard. He did not look at Tyler. He looked at Elena. "Mrs. Ward, are you okay?" Elena was trembling so hard the laundry basket slipped from her hip, spilling clean baby clothes onto the dirty floor. She could not speak. She just nodded, her eyes wide. "You need to leave," Leo said to Tyler, stepping between them. Tyler straightened his coat. He looked at the 2 large men. Doing the math. He sniffed dismissively. "I was just leaving anyway," Tyler said, stepping around them. He paused at the top of the stairs and looked back at Elena. His eyes were dead. "I will see you in court. Elena, and tell your boyfriend he better watch his back." He descended the stairs, his footsteps fading away. Elena sank to her knees, fumbling for her keys. She could hear Mia screaming inside, a frantic, hungry cry. Her hands were shaking so badly she could not get the key into the lock. She scraped the metal against the plate again and again, a sob building in her throat. "Let me," Leo said gently. He took the keys from her unresisting fingers, unlocked the door, and pushed it open. Elena scrambled inside, dropping to the floor by the bassinet to scoop up her daughter, rocking her frantically, whispering broken apologies into the baby's soft hair. 20 minutes later, the hallway was filled with men. Marco DeLuca walked into the apartment. He did not knock. He walked straight to the kitchen where Elena was sitting on a rickety chair, clutching Mia, staring at the wall. Leo met him at the door, speaking in a hushed, urgent tone. Marco listened, his face a mask of granite. He walked past his men and stopped in front of Elena. He looked at the laundry scattered on the floor. He looked at the way Elena was curled around the baby, making herself as small as possible. Then he looked at the wall outside the door, where the drywall was cracked from the force of Tyler's blow. "Pack a bag," Marco said. Elena looked up, blinking. What? You are not staying here. Marco's voice was not angry, but it was absolute. It is not safe. He knows he can get to you. He knows he can rattle you. Next time, Leo might be 30 seconds too slow. Next time, he might kick the door down. No, Elena said, her voice weak. I cannot just leave. This is my home. This is a trap, Marco corrected. I do not want to go with you, Elena said, a flash of her old defiance sparking through the fear. I just got away from a man who told me what to do, where to live, and who I could see. I am not trading one cage for another. Marco flinched. The accusation hit its mark. He took a deep breath, crouched down so he was eye level with her, and softened his tone. Elena, look at me. She raised her eyes. I am not trying to control you, Marco said. I am trying to keep you alive. Look at your hands. Elena looked down. Her hands were still trembling. You are terrified, he said gently, and you should be. Tyler is desperate. Desperate men do dangerous things. I have a 12-bedroom house behind a 10-foot gate with a security system that costs more than this entire building. Come stay with me, just until the legal situation is settled, just until he realizes he cannot touch you. Elena looked at Mia. The baby had finally fallen back asleep, her tiny fist clutching the fabric of Elena's shirt. She thought about the sound of Tyler's hand hitting the wall. She thought about how easily he had slipped into the building. Pride was a luxury she could not afford, not with a newborn. Okay, she whispered. Marco nodded, standing up. He turned to Leo. Get boxes. We are moving everything. Everything, Elena asked. Everything you want to keep. We are not coming back here. The next hour was a blur of efficiency. Marco took off his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and began to work. He did not delegate the packing of Elena's personal things to his men. He did it himself. Elena watched, feeling a strange dislocation, as the most powerful crime boss in the city carefully folded her worn towels and placed them into a cardboard box. He wrapped her few framed photos in newspaper. He dismantled the bassinet with skilled, steady hands. When he picked up Mia's car seat, he handled it as if it were made of spun glass. There was a respect in his movements, a quiet reverence for her meager possessions that unsettled her defenses more than his commands ever could. Tyler would have thrown her things into garbage bags. Tyler would have made her feel small for having so little. Marco treated her life, however broken, as something valuable. The drive to the mansion was silent. Mia slept the whole way. When they arrived, the sheer scale of the estate was overwhelming. The gates swung open silently, revealing a winding driveway lined with ancient oaks. The house sat on the hill like a fortress, lit up against the night sky. Marco led her up the grand staircase to the second floor. This is your wing, he said, gesturing down a carpeted hallway. My room is at the end of the hall if you need anything. He opened a door. The room was beautiful. It was decorated in soft creams and blues, with a large 4-poster bed and a bay window overlooking the gardens. But what made Elena gasp was the corner of the room. A sturdy wooden crib was already set up, made of dark cherry wood. Beside it was a changing table stocked with diapers, wipes, and lotions. A rocking chair with a plush blanket draped over the back sat near the window. You did this? Elena asked, turning to him. I had the staff set it up while we were at the hospital, Marco admitted, rubbing the back of his neck, looking suddenly unsure of himself, just in case. I thought, well, I hoped you would agree to come eventually. Elena walked over to the crib. She ran her hand along the smooth railing. Tears pricked her eyes. It was safety. It was a sanctuary. Thank you, she whispered. Get some sleep. Elena, Marco said softly, you are safe here. But sleep was elusive. At 2 a.m, Mia woke up fussy. The unfamiliar environment, or perhaps the lingering stress from the afternoon, made her restless. Elena paced the room, bouncing the baby, but Mia's cries only grew louder, echoing in the high ceilings of the silent house. Elena felt a spike of panic. She was going to wake him. She was going to wake the whole house. She was a nuisance, a burden. A soft knock sounded on the door. Elena froze. I'm sorry, she called out, her voice frantic. I'm trying to quiet her down. I am so sorry. The door eased open. It was Marco, but not the Marco she was used to. Gone was the suit, the tie, the armor of the dawn. He was wearing a soft, gray cotton t-shirt that clung to his chest and a pair of loose sweatpants. His feet were bare. His hair was tousled, as if he had just rolled out of bed. He looked younger, softer. Human. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. "She just will not settle," Elena said, rocking Mia vigorously. "I think she has a stomachache. I am sorry we woke you." "Stop apologizing," Marco said, stepping into the room. He walked over to them. "Here, let me try." He did not wait for permission. He reached out and took the crying baby from Elena's exhausted arms. Marco settled Mia against his shoulder, one large hand patting her back with a rhythmic, hollow sound. He began to walk around the room, humming a low, tuneless melody deep in his chest. Elena watched him, leaning against the changing table for support. The sight of him, this dangerous man in his pajamas, walking the floor with her colic daughter, did something to her heart that she wasn't ready to name. Slowly, the crying subsided into whimpers, and then into deep, rhythmic breaths. "She likes you," Elena said softly, a small, tired smile touching her lips. Marco turned, keeping his voice a whisper. "She just likes that I am warm." He walked back toward the crib, but stopped in front of Elena. They stood side by side in the dim light of the nursery lamp. The house was utterly silent around them. Marco looked down at Mia, smoothing a tuft of hair on the baby's head. Then he looked at Elena. "You look exhausted," he said. "I am," she admitted. Marco shifted his weight. His shoulder brushed against hers. The contact was electric. It sent a jolt of heat through Elena's tired body. She didn't pull away. She leaned into it, just a fraction of an inch, drawn to his gravity. Marco went still. He looked down at her, his dark eyes searching her face. The air between them grew heavy, charged with the same tension that had been in the hospital room, but amplified by the privacy of the night and the intimacy of the bedroom. He shifted Mia to one arm, freeing his other hand. Slowly, deliberately, he reached out. His fingers hovered near her face, as if he wanted to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Elena stopped breathing. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted him to touch her. She wanted him to close the gap. She tilted her chin up, her lips parting slightly. Marco's fingers grazed her cheekbone, a touch so light it was almost a ghost. His pupils were blown wide. He leaned in, his gaze dropping to her mouth. Then he stopped. A muscle feathered in his jaw. He seemed to physically wrestle with himself. A war fought in the silence of seconds. He was her boss. He was her protector. She was vulnerable, recovering and fleeing a traumatic relationship. He pulled his hand back, stepping away with a visible effort. "You should sleep," he murmured, his voice husky. He placed Mia gently into the crib, covering her with a light blanket. He did not look at Elena again as he walked to the door. "Good night, Elena. Good night, Marco," she whispered. The door clicked shut, leaving her alone in the semi-darkness. She touched her cheek where his fingers had been, feeling the lingering warmth and the ache of something unspoken that was beginning to take root deep in her chest. Across the city, in a smoky pool hall that smelled of stale beer and bad decisions, Tyler Hayes sat in a booth. Across from him sat a man with a jagged scar running down his neck. Lieutenant Russo, a known enforcer for the Moretti family, the DeLuca's bitterest rivals. "You say she's staying at the mansion?" Russo asked, swirling the ice in his whiskey glass. Tyler nodded, his eyes hard and vindictive. "Moved in tonight, taken by a private security detail. And you are sure the kid is yours?" "She's mine," Tyler said. "But DeLuca is acting like he owns them. He threatened me. He humiliated me." Russo smiled, a slow, predatory expression. "Marco DeLuca has a soft spot. That is interesting. We have been trying to find a crack in his armor for years." "I can tell you the layout of the old service entrance," Tyler said, leaning in. "Elena used to talk about it. The cameras have a blind spot near the delivery bay." Russo raised an eyebrow. "You would rat out your wife?" "I want my family back," Tyler said. his voice twisting the word family into something possessive and ugly. "And if Marco DeLuca has to burn for that to happen, then let him burn." "I am listening," Russo said. Tyler pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, a sketch of the mansion's grounds Elena had once doodled on a napkin when explaining her cleaning route. He slid it across the table. "Help me get them out," Tyler said. "And I will give you Marco DeLuca on a silver platter." Russo picked up the napkin. He grinned. "It is a deal." 3 weeks had passed since the night Marco DeLuca brought Elena and Mia to the estate, and in that time, the sprawling mansion had undergone a quiet, subtle transformation. What had once been a cold fortress of marble and mahogany now bore the unmistakable signs of life. A pacifier sat on the granite countertop of the kitchen island. A soft pink blanket was often draped over the arm of the leather sofa in the den. The scent of baby powder mingled with the rich aroma of polished wood and Marco's sandalwood cologne. For Elena, the days had settled into a strange, suspended rhythm. She was no longer an employee, yet she could not quite accept the role of a guest. Her pride would not allow it. So, she created a middle ground. In the mornings, while Mia cooed in her swing, Elena would tidy the West Wing, dusting the bookshelves and organizing the linen closets, despite Marco's insistence that the housekeeping staff could handle it. It was her way of paying rent, a desperate attempt to balance a ledger that felt impossibly weighted in Marco's favor. But it was the nights that blurred the lines. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant wind rattling the oak trees outside. Elena walked into the kitchen, her hair tied up in a messy bun, her eyes heavy with sleep. Mia had been fussy, needing a bottle, and Elena was operating on 4 hours of broken rest. She stopped in the doorway. Marco was there. He was standing by the stove, stirring a pot of marinara sauce that smelled of garlic and basil. He wore sweatpants and a black t-shirt that stretched across his broad back. A stack of files sat on the island, ignored for the moment. "You are awake," Marco said without turning around. Elena walked further into the room, clutching the empty baby bottle. "She is hungry. Again." Marco turned, holding out a mug. It was steaming. Elena took it automatically, inhaling the scent. It was coffee, mostly decaf, with a heavy splash of oat milk and 2 sugars, exactly how she drank it. He knew. He had noticed. "Thank you," she murmured, taking a sip. "Why are you cooking pasta at 2 a.m? Marco shrugged, turning back to the stove. "I missed dinner. Meeting ran late, and I find the process calming." He reached into the cabinet above him to grab a bowl, but the hinge squeaked and stuck halfway, without a pause. Marco grabbed a screwdriver from the junk drawer, a drawer Elena had organized 2 days ago, and tightened the screw with 3 efficient turns. He tested the door. It closed. Silently, Elena watched him over the rim of her mug. This was the cognitive dissonance that kept her off balance. This was Marco DeLuca, the man who controlled half the city's vice, the man whose name made grown men stutter. And here he was, fixing cabinet hinges and cooking late-night spaghetti while making sure her coffee was perfect. He plated the pasta and slid the bowl toward her across the island. "Eat," he commanded gently. "You are breastfeeding. You need the calories." "I am just here for the bottle," Elena protested weakly, though her stomach rumbled at the smell. "I will warm the bottle," Marco said, taking it from her hand. "You eat." He moved to the microwave, his movements efficient and practiced. Elena sat on the bar stool, twirling a forkful of pasta. It was delicious. She watched him lean against the counter, waiting for the microwave timer. His arms crossed over his chest. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes a little deeper than usual. "You do this a lot," she said softly. "Take care of everyone else. Who takes care of you? Marco?" Marco looked at her, surprised by the question. He held her gaze for a long moment, the silence stretching between them, thick and warm. "I do not need taking care of." "Elena, I am the one who handles things. Everyone needs something," she countered. The microwave beeped. Marco took out the bottle, testing the temperature against the inside of his wrist, a gesture he had learned from watching her. He handed it to her, his fingers brushing hers. The contact sent a jolt of awareness through her, waking her up more effectively than the coffee. "Go feed her," Marco said, his voice dropping an octave. "Before she wakes up the whole house?" Elena took the bottle and fled to the nursery, but the image of him standing in the dim kitchen, domestic and dangerous all at once, burned behind her eyelids for the rest of the night. The fragile peace shattered 2 days later. It was a Thursday afternoon. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening another storm. Elena was in the library, reading a book while Mia slept in the portable bassinet next to her. When the intercom buzzed, Leo appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "Mrs. Ward, there is a man at the gate, a process server. He says he has documents for you." Elena's heart dropped into her stomach. "Let him in." 10 minutes later, she sat in Marco's office, the thick packet of papers resting on the heavy oak desk. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together in her lap to stop the tremors. Marco stood by the window, his back to the room, radiating a cold, dark fury. He had read the papers first. "He is suing for full custody," Elena whispered, her voice cracking. She stared at the legal jargon: unfit parent, endangerment of a minor, cohabitation with a known criminal element. Tyler wasn't just fighting her. He was destroying her character. The affidavit claimed that by living with Marco DeLuca, Elena was knowingly placing her infant daughter in the line of fire of gang violence. It painted Tyler as the concerned, stable father trying to rescue his child from a mother who had lost her moral compass. "He's using you against me," Elena said, the realization turning into a sharp, panicked anger. "He's right. The judge will look at this and see a maid living with a mob boss. They will take her away." Marco turned around. His face was hard, his eyes blazing. "He will not take her." "This is a tactic. It is a scare tactic designed to make you run back to him. It is working," Elena cried, standing up. She paced the length of the Persian rug, running her hands through her hair. "I should never have come here. I should have gone to a shelter. I should have gone anywhere but here. I gave him the ammunition he needed. Marco." Marco moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. "You were not safe anywhere else. He would have found you in a shelter in 24 hours. "So now I lose my daughter," Elena shouted, tears spilling over. "Is that the trade-off? My safety for her custody?" "Stop it," Marco snapped. He did not shout, but the authority in his voice halted her spiraling panic. Elena collapsed into one of the leather armchairs, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving with sobs. "I cannot fight him," she wept. "He has money. He has a lawyer. I have nothing. I am just a maid." Marco knelt. The movement was so fluid, so unexpected, that Elena's breath hitched. She lowered her hands, looking down at him. Marco DeLuca, a man who bowed to no one, was on one knee in front of her chair. He placed his large, warm hand over her clenched hands on her knee. "Look at me," he said softly. Elena met his eyes. They were dark, intense, and filled with a fierce resolve that stole the air from her lungs. "You are not just a maid," Marco said, his voice vibrating with conviction. "You are the mother of that little girl. And you are under my roof. That makes you mine to protect." He squeezed her hands. "Tyler thinks he can bleed you dry with legal fees? I have more money than God. Elena, I will hire the best family law firm in the state. I will hire a team of lawyers so vicious they will make Tyler's attorney look like a traffic court public defender. We will bury him in paperwork. We will countersue for harassment, for emotional distress, for the years of financial abuse. But the judge," Elena whispered, "the reputation. I will handle the reputation. Marco promised, we will seal records. We will call in favors. I will burn the world down before I let him take Mia from you. Do you understand?" Elena looked at him, seeing the raw power he was offering her. He was handing her his sword and shield. The emotion surged in her chest, not fear this time, but an overwhelming gratitude that felt dangerously like love. She leaned forward, her tears dripping onto their joined hands. "Why?" she choked out. "Why do you care this much?" Marco reached up. His hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he cupped her face. His thumbs brushed away the tears on her cheeks, his touch reverent. "Because you are the only real thing I have found in a long time," he murmured. The world seemed to narrow down to the space between them. The air grew thin. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that matched the intensity in Marco's eyes. He leaned in slowly, deliberately. She could feel his breath on her lips, warm and scented with mint. She saw his gaze drop to her mouth, saw the hunger there, raw and unguarded. He pressed his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. It was an intimacy more profound than any touch. They were sharing the same air, the same fear, the same desperate need. Elena's eyelids fluttered shut. She leaned into him, her body yearning to close the gap, to taste the safety he offered. But then the image of the court papers flashed in her mind. Cohabitation. Unfit. If she kissed him, she proved Tyler right. If she gave in to this, she was confirming every accusation in that affidavit. Elena pulled back, gasping as if she were surfacing from deep water. "I can't," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Marco, I can't. If this happens, it proves him right." Marco froze. He opened his eyes, and for a second she saw a flash of pain so deep it made her chest ache, but he masked it instantly. He nodded, once, and pulled his hands away, standing up and smoothing his suit jacket. "You are right," he said, his voice rough. "I apologize. It will not happen again." He turned back to the window, putting distance between them, but the air in the room remained charged, electric with the ghost of the kiss that hadn't happened. That night, the atmosphere in the mansion shifted from tense to besieged. Around 11 o'clock, Leo knocked on the library door where Marco was working. He didn't come in alone. He was dragging a man by the collar of a leather jacket, a man whose face was bruised and bloody. "We found him parked down the road," Leo said, shoving the man into a chair. "He has been circling the perimeter for 2 hours. Marco stood up slowly. "Who are you?" The man spat blood onto the carpet and stayed silent. Leo tossed a manila envelope onto Marco's desk. "We found this in his glove box." Marco opened the envelope. He pulled out a stack of photographs. Elena felt the blood drain from her face as she watched from the doorway, where she had been drawn by the commotion. The photos were of her, grainy, telephoto shots taken through the windows of the mansion. There was a picture of her in the garden with Mia, a picture of her bedroom window, circled in red marker, a diagram of the shift changes for the security guards at the front gate. Marco stared at the photos, his hand clenched around them, crumpling the edges. "Tyler," he said, "the name was a curse." "Tyler took these?" Elena asked, her voice trembling. "No," Marco said, his eyes scanning the diagram. "Tyler is not smart enough for this kind of surveillance, but he is feeding information to someone who is—" He looked at the captured man. "You are Moretti's crew, aren't you?" The man smirked. "Get him out of here," Marco ordered Leo, his voice icy. "Take him to the warehouse. Find out exactly what Tyler told them." As the men dragged the intruder out, Marco turned to Elena. His face was a mask of terrified aggression. "That is it," he said. "Lockdown. No one goes in or out. You do not leave the house. You do not go into the garden. You stay away from the windows." Elena felt the walls of the room closing in. It was happening again. The control, the confinement. "I cannot be a prisoner." "Marco," she snapped. "You are a target," he roared back, slamming his hand onto the desk. The argument spilled out of the office and into the kitchen an hour later. Elena was pacing, furious and frightened, while Marco stood by the island, pouring a drink with a shaking hand. "You are suffocating me," Elena accused. "I left Tyler to escape this. I left to be free, not to be locked in a gilded cage where I cannot even take my daughter for a walk in the sun. I'm trying to keep you alive." Marco slammed the glass down so hard liquor splashed over the rim. "Do you think I want this? Do you think I want to turn my home into a fortress? Then let me leave. Let me take Mia and go somewhere else." "No!" The word exploded out of him. Marco rounded the island, storming toward her. He stopped inches from her, his chest heaving. "You are not leaving," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh, desperate whisper. "I cannot let you leave." "Because of your pride?" Elena demanded, looking up at him defiantly. Because you cannot stand to lose to Tyler? Because I am terrified, Marco confessed. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena stared at him, stunned. Marco ran a hand over his face, looking suddenly exhausted. I am terrified. Elena, I have never been afraid of anything in my life. I have had guns pointed at my head. I have walked into meetings knowing I might not walk out. I never cared. But the thought of you out there, alone, the thought of him getting his hands on Mia. He looked at her, his eyes stripping away all pretenses. I cannot stop thinking about you, he admitted, his voice raw. I cannot stop thinking about her tiny hands grabbing my finger, about the way you smell like vanilla and rain. You have rewired my entire brain. Elena, if you leave and something happens to you, it will break me. Elena's anger evaporated, replaced by a surge of emotion so strong it made her knees weak. He wasn't trying to own her. He was trying to survive her. She stepped into his space. She reached out, placing her hands on his chest, feeling the frantic thud of his heart beneath the silk shirt. Marco, she whispered. He looked down at her, his resistance crumbling. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against him. It was a desperate embrace, a clinging in the middle of a storm. Tell me to stop, Marco breathed, leaning his forehead against hers again. Tell me to stop, and I will walk away. I don't want you to stop, Elena confessed, the truth finally breaking free. He groaned low in his throat and tilted her head back. His mouth hovered inches from hers, both of them trembling on the precipice. The air was hot, heavy with the scent of danger and desire. Elena's fingers curled into his shirt, pulling him down. Way! The sharp, static-laced cry of the baby monitor on the counter cut through the moment like a siren. Marco flinched as if he had been shot. Elena jumped back, her heart racing. Mia, she gasped, breathless and disoriented. Marco took a step back, running a hand through his hair, his chest heaving. He looked at the monitor, then at Elena. The moment was gone, shattered by the reality of the innocent life that depended on them. Go, he said hoarsely. Go to her. Elena fled the kitchen, leaving Marco gripping the edge of the granite counter, his knuckles white, as he tried to steady his breathing, while the mansion settled into a restless, guarded night. A black sedan sat parked in an alleyway downtown. Tyler Hayes sat in the passenger seat. Lieutenant Russo sat in the driver's seat, lighting a cigarette. They picked up my guy, Russo said calmly, blowing smoke out the window. Tyler panicked. Does that mean the deal is off? Did he talk? Russo chuckled darkly. It means Marco is distracted. He's going to be watching the perimeter. He's going to be doubling the guard. He's going to be paranoid. So we can't get in, Tyler said, slamming his hand on the dashboard. On the contrary, Russo said, paranoia makes men make mistakes, and you gave us the perfect distraction. What distraction? The court date, Russo said. Tyler frowned. The hearing is in 3 days. Exactly. Russo turned to look at Tyler, the street lamp casting long shadows across his scarred face. Marco will be at the courthouse. He will have his best men with him to protect you and your wife during the proceedings. He will leave a skeleton crew at the house because he thinks the fight is happening in the courtroom. A slow smile spread across Tyler's face. So we hit the house while he is arguing with the judge, Tyler said. We hit the house. Russo confirmed. We take the baby. We take the woman if she is there. And when Marco realizes what happened, he will be too late. Tyler looked out the window at the rain-slicked streets. I just want my daughter, Tyler said, though the conviction in his voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. You will get your daughter, Russo promised, flicking his cigarette butt into a puddle. And we will get Marco DeLuca's heart in a box. The air in the family courtroom tasted of stale coffee, floor wax, and judgment. It was a suffocating atmosphere, heavy with the weight of decisions that would alter lives forever. Elena sat at the defendant's table, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned the color of bone. She wore a navy blue dress that Marco had arranged for her. It was modest, tailored to perfection, and made of a fabric that felt too expensive for her skin. It was armor, purchased by a man who understood that in this world, Appearance was the first line of defense. Across the aisle, Tyler Hayes leaned back in his chair, the picture of a grieved fatherhood. He wore a gray suit that fit him well enough to look respectable, his hair combed back, his expression a practiced mask of sorrow and concern. Beside him, his lawyer, a man with a sharp nose and sharper eyes named Meister Vance, shuffled papers with a theatrical flair. In the back of the courtroom, sitting alone on a wooden bench, was Marco DeLuca. He had not asked permission to come. He had simply stated he would be there. His presence was a physical force in the room. Even the bailiff kept glancing nervously in his direction. Marco sat perfectly still, his dark eyes fixed on the back of Elena's head, radiating a silent, steady heat that was both a comfort and a terrifying liability. Elena knew the judge, an older woman with wire-rimmed glasses and a mouth set in a thin line, had already noted him. Every time the judge looked from the file to Marco and then to Elena, the connection tightened like a noose. Mr. Vance stood up, buttoning his jacket. He walked toward the podium, his voice smooth and carrying a note of condescending pity. "Your Honor," he began, gesturing toward Tyler. "My client is a hard-working, tax-paying citizen who simply wants to rescue his infant daughter from an unstable environment. We are not here to disparage Mrs. Ward. We are here to save her child." He turned to look at Elena, his eyes cold. "The facts are undeniable. Mrs. Ward fled the marital home without notice. She has no fixed address of her own. She has no independent income substantial enough to support a child in this city. And, most damning of all, she has chosen to take up residence in the fortress of a man whose name appears in organized crime. Task Force reports more often than it does in the phone book." Objection. Elena's lawyer, a high-priced shark Marco had hired named Eleanor Sterling, stood up. Conjecture. "Mr. DeLuca has never been convicted of a felony." The judge waved a hand. "Overruled. This is a custody hearing. Miss Sterling, not a criminal trial. I am interested in the environment the child is living in. Proceed, Mr." Vance smiled thinly. "Thank you. Your Honor, the question is simple. Is it in the best interest of a 3-week-old infant to live in a house guarded by armed men? A house that is a known target for violence? Or should she be with her father, a man with a steady job, a safe home, and a clean record?" Elena felt the walls closing in. Tyler looked at her, and for a second, the mask slipped. He winked. A tiny, imperceptible movement that made bile rise in her throat. When it was Elena's turn to take the stand, her legs felt like lead. She walked up the short steps and sat in the witness box, the leather chair squeaking in the silence. "Mrs. Ward?" Eleanor Sterling asked gently. "Why did you leave your husband?" Elena looked at the microphone. She thought about the dent in the wall. She thought about the way Tyler used to check the odometer on her car to make sure she hadn't gone anywhere he didn't approve of. "He suffocated me," Elena said, her voice small. She cleared her throat and tried again. Louder, "He made me feel like I was not a person. I was just an extension of him. He controlled the money. He controlled who I spoke to. And when I got pregnant, it got worse. He used the baby as a threat. He told me if I ever left, he would make sure I never saw her again." "Mister?" Vance stood up for cross-examination. He walked toward her, holding a file. "Mrs. Ward, you claim my client is controlling, yet you currently live in the home of Marco DeLuca, a man known for absolute authority. Does Mr. DeLuca not control who enters his home? Does he not have armed guards watching your every move? It is for protection," Elena insisted, gripping the armrests. "Protection from whom?" Vance shot back. "From the enemies he created? You traded a husband for a mob boss. Mrs. Ward, tell the court. Why do you live with him? What kind of mother brings her child into a lion's den?" Elena looked out into the gallery. She met Marco's eyes. He wasn't looking at the lawyer. He was looking at her. His expression was open, devoid of judgment, offering her his strength as if he could push it through the air between them. She took a deep breath. "I live with him because he gave me a choice," Elena said, her voice ringing clear in the courtroom. The lawyer paused, frowning. "Excuse me?" Tyler never gave me a choice, she continued, turning to look at the judge. He told me what to think, what to wear, how to be. But Marco, Mr. DeLuca, he has never forced me to do anything. He opened his home when I had nowhere to go. He protects my daughter not because he owns her, but because he respects her. Her voice cracked, thick with emotion. I have been safer and more respected in the home of a so-called criminal than I ever was in the home of my husband. Silence stretched across the room. Tyler's face turned a mottled red. Marco remained motionless, but his jaw clenched, a muscle feathering in his cheek. The judge sighed, taking off her glasses and rubbing the bridge of her nose. This is a complex case, the judge said wearily. The court has serious concerns about the mother's living arrangements. However, the court also finds the father's behavior concerning. I am not prepared to issue a final ruling today. She banged her gavel. I am ordering a court-appointed guardian ad litem to evaluate both homes. I want psychological evaluations for both parents. Until then, custody remains shared, though physical custody will remain with the mother, provided she stays within the jurisdiction. We will reconvene in 30 days. It was a non-victory, a delay, a stay of execution. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun was blinding. Elena walked down the marble steps, her legs trembling. Marco was right beside her, his hand hovering at the small of her back but not touching, hyper-aware of the eyes on them. Well, that went well. Tyler was waiting at the bottom of the steps. He lit a cigarette, blowing smoke in their direction. He looked at Marco, then at Elena. You bought yourself a month, Tyler sneered. But you heard the judge. She hates that you are with him. Every day you stay in that mansion, you are digging your own grave. Let us go, Marco said, his voice low and dangerous, guiding Elena toward the waiting black SUV. Tyler stepped in front of them. I am going to win, Elle, because eventually Marco here is going to slip up. Or get arrested, or get shot, and when he does, I will be there to pick up the pieces. You will never really get away from me. Marco stepped forward, his shadow engulfing Tyler. If you say one more word to her, Marco said softly, I will make you regret you were born. Tyler laughed, but he took a step back. Big talk for a guy who almost cost her the kid today. Tick-tock. DeLuca. The ride back to the mansion was suffocatingly silent. Elena stared out the window, watching the city blur by. Tyler's words echoed in her mind, mixing with the judge's skepticism. The court has serious concerns. She was the problem. She was the anchor dragging Marco down. She was the reason his name was being dragged through the mud, the reason his enemies were circling. By the time they reached the estate, the sun had set. Elena went straight to the nursery. She picked up Mia, holding her tightly, breathing in the scent of milk and baby lotion. I am sorry, she whispered to the sleeping infant. I'm so sorry I put you in this mess. Guilt, sharp and cold, sliced through her. She was selfish. She was staying here because she wanted to be near him, because she felt safe, but her presence was a danger to everyone. She put Mia back in the crib and grabbed the duffel bag from the closet. She moved with frantic energy. Diapers, onesies, her own clothes. She shoved them into the bag, not bothering to fold them. She had to leave, tonight. Before the evaluation, before Marco got hurt, before Tyler found a way to use them to destroy the DeLuca empire. Elena? She froze. Marco stood in the doorway of her bedroom. He had taken off his suit jacket and tie, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp as they landed on the open duffel bag. What are you doing? He asked. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. I am leaving, Elena said, not looking at him. She grabbed a stack of burp cloths and threw them in. Leaving? Marco repeated, stepping into the room. Where? Where are you going to go? Elena, I do not know anywhere, Elena shouted, the stress of the day finally exploding. I will find a motel. I will go to another state. I do not care. Marco crossed the room in 3 long strides. He grabbed the duffel bag, pulling it from her hands and tossing it onto the floor. You are not going anywhere, he growled. Stop telling me what to do, Elena yelled, pushing against his chest. Do you not see what is happening? I am ruining you. The judge hates you. Tyler is using me to get to you. He's feeding information to your rivals because of me." "I do not care about the rivals," Marco shouted back, grabbing her wrists to stop her from hitting him. "I am a liability," Elena sobbed, her fight draining out of her, leaving her limp in his grasp. "Everyone who gets close to me gets hurt. Tyler is going to use Mia to destroy you. He will keep coming until you are dead or in jail. I cannot be the reason you lose everything." Marco stared down at her. His chest was heaving. His eyes were dark, burning with an emotion so intense it frightened her. "You think you are a liability?" Marco asked, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "You think I care about the business? About the reputation?" He released her wrists and cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. His thumbs brushed over her wet cheeks, wiping away the tears. "I have spent my whole life building walls, Elena, building an empire of ice and silence. And then you walked in with a mop and a bucket and shattered it all." Elena's breath hitched. "Marco, I am terrified," he admitted, his forehead resting against hers. "I am terrified that I cannot keep you safe enough. But the thought of you leaving the thought of walking past this room and finding it empty, that is the only thing that scares me more than Tyler." Elena looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. It wasn't just protection. It wasn't just duty. It was a hunger that matched her own. "I am falling for you," she whispered, the confession tumbling out before she could stop it. "And it is the most dangerous thing I have ever done. Being near you feels like safety and danger all at once." Marco went still. His eyes searched hers, looking for any sign of hesitation. When he found none, a low sound broke from his throat. Half groan, half prayer. "I've been trying so hard not to want you," he murmured against her skin. "I have been trying to be noble, to be the protector, but I cannot lie to you anymore, and I cannot lie to myself." He didn't wait for an answer this time. He closed the distance between them, his mouth crashing down on hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It was the taste of months of suppressed longing, of fear and adrenaline, and late-night kitchen talks finally boiling over. Elena gasped, opening to him, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer. Marco's arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her slightly, pressing her body flush against his. He kissed her like he was drowning, and she was air. He kissed her like he wanted to imprint himself onto her soul so that no one, not Tyler, not the law, not the world, could ever claim she didn't belong to him. She tasted of salt and coffee. He tasted of scotch and desperation. Marco walked her backward until her back hit the wall. He pressed his hips against hers, the friction sending a jolt of electricity straight to her core. His hands were everywhere, in her hair, on her waist, sliding down to her hips, holding her as if she were something precious and breakable, yet anchoring her to the earth. He broke the kiss, dragging in a ragged breath, his forehead resting against hers. His eyes were blown wide, black pools of desire. "Elena," he rasped. He waited, even now, consumed by fire. He gave her the power. He asked for permission. "Is this what you want?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Because if we do this, if I cross this line, I am never going back. You are mine, in every way that matters." Elena looked at him. She saw the man who had held her hand while she gave birth, the man who had walked the floor with her colic baby, the man who was willing to burn his kingdom down for her. She reached up, tangling her fingers in the hair at the nape of his neck. "I am yours," she whispered. She pulled him down to her. Marco made a rough sound and captured her lips again. This time, the kiss was deeper, slower, full of a terrifying, beautiful promise. He swept her up into his arms, carrying her toward the bed, the duffel bag forgotten on the floor. Outside, the wind howled around the stone walls of the mansion. But inside, the fear of the day dissolved into the heat of skin on skin, of whispers in the dark, and the fragile, powerful hope of two broken people finding home in each other. The sun rose gray and pale over the city the next morning. Inside the mansion, the silence was heavy and sweet. Elena lay tangled in the sheets, her head resting on Marco's chest. His arm was thrown over her. his breathing deep and even. For the first time in years, she felt a profound, settling peace. The monsters were outside the gates. In here, there was only warmth. But the monsters were not sleeping. 5 miles away, near the industrial docks, a massive explosion ripped through the morning air. A warehouse belonging to the DeLuca organization, one that stored high-value electronics, erupted into flames. Sirens wailed across the city. At the front gate of the mansion, Leo's radio crackled to life. Code red at the docks. A frantic voice shouted, "The boss's main shipment is burning. We need backup. Fire crews are being blocked. Send the secondary team." Leo frowned, looking at the monitors. "The boss is sleeping. I am not waking him for a fire." "It is not just a fire. Leo, they are hitting the perimeter. We need men now," Leo cursed. He looked at the quiet house, then at the roster, and he made a judgment call, the kind of split-second decision that wars are lost on. "Dante, take the roving team and go. I will hold the gate with the skeleton crew." "Copy that." 3 black SUVs peeled away from the estate, tires screeching, heading toward the smoke rising in the distance. From a ridge overlooking the property, Lieutenant Russo lowered his binoculars. He watched the taillights fade. He picked up his phone. They took the bait. Russo said, "The heavy guard is gone." In the passenger seat of the car next to him, Tyler Hayes sat with a baseball bat in his lap, his knuckles white. "Let us go get my family," Tyler said. Russo signaled to the van behind them. 7 men in ski masks checked their weapons. The distraction had worked. The fortress was exposed, and inside, oblivious to the storm descending upon them. Marco and Elena slept on, holding on to the last few minutes of peace they would know for a very long time. The nursery was quiet, save for the rhythmic sway of the rocking chair where Elena sat, humming a soft lullaby. Sunlight usually flooded this room, but today the heavy velvet curtains were drawn tight, a precaution Marco had insisted upon. Downstairs, the hum of the household was distant. Marco was in the West Wing study, meeting with his financial advisors, trying to trace the leak that had compromised the warehouse shipment earlier that morning. Elena looked down at Mia, who was finally dozing off, her tiny eyelashes fluttering against her cheek. For a moment, the world felt small and safe. Then, the silence shattered. It started with a crash from the side of the house, the service entrance near the kitchen. It was the sound of heavy wood splintering, followed immediately by shouts that did not belong to Marco's men. Elena froze, her blood turning to ice in her veins. She knew that sound. It was the sound of a perimeter being breached. Boots thudded heavily on the stairs. They were fast, aggressive, and coming straight for the residential wing. "Get the girl!" a voice roared from the hallway. Elena moved on pure instinct. She scooped Mia up, clutching the baby to her chest so tightly the infant let out a startled cry. Elena scrambled across the room, her socks slipping on the polished wood floor. She reached the nursery door just as a shadow fell across the threshold of the hallway outside. She slammed the door shut and twisted the lock. It was a flimsy defense against men who had just broken through an oak service door. But it was all she had. Elena! The voice on the other side of the wood made her knees buckle. It was Tyler. But it was not the smooth, charming Tyler of the past. His voice was ragged, high-pitched with adrenaline and madness. "Open the door, Elena. I know you're in there." Elena backed away, her eyes darting around the room. She placed Mia in the crib, whispering a frantic shush, and grabbed the heavy dresser standing against the wall. Gritting her teeth, she shoved it. The wood groaned against the floorboards as she walked it inch by inch until it wedged against the door handle. Bam! A fist hammered against the door. "Do not make me break it down," Tyler shouted. "You are bringing this on yourself. You are keeping my daughter in a war zone." Elena pulled her phone from her pocket, her fingers shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She hit the speed dial for Marco. It rang once. "Elena?" Marco's voice was sharp. He already knew something was wrong. "They are inside," she gasped, tears springing to her eyes as another heavy blow shook the nursery door. "Tyler is here, and he's at the nursery door. Marco, please, I am coming." Marco roared, "Stay down. Do not open that door." The line went dead. "Open up," Tyler screamed. "I am taking her." "Elena, you think DeLuca can save you? His men are all at the docks." "I told you I would win." The wood around the lock frame began to crack. A splinter of painted white wood flew into the room. Mia began to wail, a thin, terrified sound that cut straight through Elena's heart. She ran back to the crib. She couldn't lift Mia and run. There was nowhere to go. The window was a 2-story drop. She grabbed the baby and crouched down behind the heavy wooden frame of the crib, shielding Mia's body with her own, curling into a ball. "I love you," she whispered into Mia's soft hair, her voice trembling. "I love you so much. I will not let him take you. I promise." Crack. The door gave way. The lock snapped, and the dresser was shoved aside with a screech of wood on wood. Tyler stumbled into the room. He was followed by 2 men in ski masks, holding handguns. Tyler looked wild, his eyes wide and bloodshot, his suit disheveled. "There you are," he breathed, spotting Elena huddled behind the crib. He took a step toward her, reaching out. "Get up. We are leaving." Before his fingers could touch her arm, the hallway exploded with noise. "Drop it!" Marco's voice was a thunderclap. He appeared in the shattered doorway, Leo and Dante flanking him. Marco held a black pistol in a steady, 2-handed grip. His face was a mask of cold, lethal fury. The 2 masked men with Tyler spun around, raising their weapons. "Down!" Marco shouted to Elena. Elena threw herself over Mia, pressing her face into the carpet. Gunshots rang out, deafening. Popping sounds that echoed in the confined space. Glass from a picture frame on the wall shattered. Plaster dust rained down. It was over in seconds. The 2 masked men were on the ground, groaning, neutralized by the precision of Marco's guards. But Tyler had not fallen. In the chaos, he had lunged. He grabbed Elena by the upper arm, hauling her up from the floor with a strength born of desperation. "No!" Elena screamed, trying to twist away, but she was still clutching Mia. Tyler dragged her backward, putting her between himself and Marco's gun. He backed them toward the large bay window that overlooked the stone patio below. "Back off!" Tyler shrieked. "Back off or we all go out the window!" Marco froze. He held up a hand, signaling Leo and Dante to hold their fire. Blood was blossoming on the white shoulder of Marco's dress shirt, a graze from a bullet that had flown too close, but he did not seem to feel it. His eyes were locked on Tyler. "Let them go." "Tyler," Marco said. His voice was hoarse, stripped of all polish. It was the voice of a man hanging onto control by a thread. "You ruined everything," Tyler spat, pressing his back against the glass. "I had a deal. I was supposed to get my family back and leave." "There is no deal," Marco said, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. "The men you hired are down. The police are already on their way. Listen to the sirens, faintly, in the distance." The wail of approaching sirens rose above the wind. Tyler's eyes darted to the window, then back to Marco. He looked trapped. He looked like an animal realizing the cage door had shut. "I am not going to jail," Tyler panicked, his grip on Elena tightening until she cried out in pain. "I am not letting you win. If I cannot have them, no one can." He jerked Elena toward the glass. Marco lowered his gun slightly. "Listen to me," he said. "This is your last chance. The only chance you have to walk out of this room alive." Tyler hesitated, breathing hard. "Sign the papers," Marco said. "Sign away your parental rights. Agree to a permanent restraining order. You walk out, you face the charges for the break-in. Maybe you get a plea deal, but you live." "And if I don't?" Tyler sneered, though his voice wavered. "Then the cops will be the least of your problems," Marco promised darkly. "And neither will the bosses of the men you just got shot. You failed them. Tyler, you are a liability to everyone now." The sirens were louder now, screeching up the long driveway. Blue and red lights began to flash against the nursery walls. Tyler looked out the window. He saw the police cruisers swarming the driveway. He saw the ambulance. He realized, with a dawning horror, that he had been used by the rival crew as a distraction, and now he was the only one left standing to take the fall. He looked at Elena. She was crying, clutching Mia, looking at him not with love, but with pure, unadulterated terror. "I just wanted," Tyler stammered. He looked at Marco. He saw the resolve in the other man's eyes. Panic overtook reason. Tyler shoved Elena away from him, lunging toward the hallway, trying to make a break for the back exit before the police could reach the second floor. But he had to go through Marco. As Tyler sprinted forward, Marco holstered his weapon and met him. He didn't shoot. He didn't need to. He stepped into Tyler's path and tackled him, driving his shoulder into Tyler's midsection. They hit the floor with a bone-jarring thud. Elena scrambled back into the corner with Mia, hiding her daughter's eyes, though she could not stop watching. Tyler swung wildly, his fist connecting with Marco's jaw. Marco didn't flinch. He pinned Tyler to the ground, years of silent rage pouring out of him. He grabbed Tyler by the lapels of his expensive jacket and slammed him back against the floorboards. "Stay down," Marco shouted. Tyler struggled, kicking and spitting, but he was no match for Marco's raw strength. Marco twisted Tyler's arm behind his back, holding him there. His knee pressed into Tyler's spine. "Police, drop your weapons!" Uniformed officers swarmed the hallway, guns drawn. Leo and Dante placed their weapons on the floor, raising their hands calmly. Marco did not move until an officer approached him. "He is the intruder," Marco said, breathing heavily, nodding at the man beneath him. He broke in. He held a woman and child hostage. The officers hauled Tyler up. He was bleeding from the nose, his suit torn, his dignity shredded. As they clicked the handcuffs onto his wrists, he looked over his shoulder at Elena. She looked back at him, holding Mia close. She didn't look away. She watched him be dragged out, her eyes dry. The fear was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hard finality. He was just a man, and now he was gone. 2 hours later, the precinct interrogation room was cold and smelled of coffee and sweat. Tyler sat at a metal table, slumped over. Marco stood on the other side of the one-way glass, watching. Next to him stood his lawyer, and a detective who knew better than to ask too many questions about why Marco's private security had discharged firearms. "He's ready to deal," the detective said. "He knows he is looking at kidnapping, breaking and entering, and assault." Marco walked into the room. He placed a stack of documents on the table. Tyler looked up. His eye was swelling shut. "Sign them," Marco said. Tyler looked at the papers. Termination of parental rights, sole custody agreement, no contact order. "If I sign these," Tyler croaked. "If you sign these," Marco said, his voice flat, "my lawyer will ensure the district attorney knows you cooperated. You will still go to prison, Tyler, but you might get out before you're an old man." Tyler picked up the pen. His hand shook. It wasn't remorse. Marco could see that. It was defeat. It was the realization that he had played a game he never understood against a man who wrote the rules. Tyler signed. Marco took the papers. He didn't say a word. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Tyler Hayes to the cold. Gray future he had built for himself. 3 weeks later, the summer heat had settled over the city, but inside the DeLuca estate, a cool breeze blew through the open windows. The legal dust had settled with surprising speed. With Tyler's confession and the signed documents, the court had granted Elena full, sole custody of Mia. The charges regarding the break-in were squarely pinned on Tyler and the members of the rival crew, who had been apprehended at local hospitals. Marco's lawyers had worked their magic, painting Marco as the heroic protector who defended a mother and child from a violent ex-husband. The press ate it up. The rumors in the city swirled that Marco DeLuca had gone soft, that he had been tamed by a maid, but no one dared to say it to his face, especially not now. On a Tuesday afternoon, Marco drove Elena and Mia to the city courthouse. It was a small, nondescript building, far from the grand halls where the custody battle had begun. Elena wore a simple white sundress. She held Mia, who was awake and looking around with wide, curious eyes. "Why are we here?" Elena asked as Marco parked the car. "We have the custody papers." Marco turned off the engine. He turned to her, looking suddenly nervous. He adjusted his tie, then reached into his pocket. "We are here for guardianship papers." "Yes," Marco said, "to formalize my role as her protector. But I wanted to ask you something else." He opened his door and came around to help her out. They stood on the sidewalk, under the shade of a large maple tree. The city moved around them, oblivious. Marco took a small black velvet box from his pocket. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. "Elena," Marco began, his voice low and earnest, "when you came into my office that night, I thought I was saving you. I thought I was doing a good deed." He took a step closer. "But somewhere between the hospital corridors and the late-night bottles, somewhere between fighting for your safety and watching you become a mother, I realized I was not saving you. You were saving me." He opened the box. Inside sat a ring, a vintage diamond, elegant and timeless, surrounded by smaller sapphires. "I am not asking you this for protection," Marco said, looking into her eyes. "I am not asking because it looks good for the courts. I am asking because I am hopelessly in love with you. I want to be Mia's father. But more than that, I want to be your husband." Elena looked at the ring, then at Marco. She saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the raw honesty of a man who had laid down his armor for her. She shifted Mia to her hip and reached out, touching his face. "Yes," she whispered, tears spilling over her lashes. "Yes, Marco." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't the desperate, frantic kiss of the bedroom, nor the terrified kiss of the siege. It was soft. It was slow. It was a promise. It tasted of sunlight and peace. Mia made a small cooing sound between them. Marco pulled back, smiling, a genuine, wide smile that transformed his face. He rested his large hand over Mia's back, encompassing both of them in his embrace. "Let us go make it legal," he said. The final scene took place in the dining room of the mansion. The long mahogany table, usually reserved for grim meetings with captains and lieutenants, was set with a white tablecloth and overflowing platters of food, but the atmosphere was different. A bright yellow high chair sat at the head of the table, right next to Marco's chair. A pile of colorful rattles sat on the sideboard next to a bottle of vintage wine. Leo, Dante, and a few of Marco's closest associates stood around the table, holding glasses of champagne. They looked slightly out of place in the domestic setting, but their expressions were respectful, even warm. Marco stood up. He tapped his glass with a fork. The room went silent. Marco placed a hand on Elena's shoulder. She was sitting beside him, wearing the ring, looking radiant and relaxed in a way she never had before. "I want to thank you all for coming," Marco said. "You have stood by me through wars and business deals. But today, I want to introduce you to the most important people in my life." He looked down at Elena, his eyes softening. "This is my wife, Elena, and my daughter, Mia." He raised his glass. "To family, to family," the men chorused, drinking deeply. Elena looked around the room. She saw Leo grinning. She saw Mia gumming on a piece of bread in her high chair. She saw the way Marco's hand rested protectively, possessively and lovingly on her waist. She leaned her head against his arm. Marco bent down and pressed a kiss to her temple. Against all odds, amidst the chaos and the danger, they had not just survived. They had built something new. They had built a family. And for the first time in her life, Elena knew that no matter what storms came, this house and this man would not fall. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Elena and Marco as much as I enjoyed bringing it to life for you. It is a tale that reminds us that sometimes love is the most dangerous and most rewarding risk of all. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment down below and tell me where you are listening from in the world. Did you think Marco went too far? Or did he do exactly what he needed to do? Let me know your thoughts in English in the comments section. If you enjoyed this story, please do not forget to hit that subscribe button for Mafia Romance Stories so you never miss an episode. We have many more passionate, thrilling tales coming your way. Thank you for your support, and until next time.